Okay, I try to start these out by can you give me a 2-minute history of you? Where you're from, where'd you go to school, what's your work background?
Sure, I'm Sandra O'Brien. I was born in Cleveland. I actually moved into Geauga County, married my high school sweetheart. We have 4 grown children. My bachelor's degree is in education from Bowling Green State University. Taught for a couple years, was a stay-at-home mom, then went back to school. Received my master's degree in administration from Edinburgh University in Pennsylvania, and then decided to get into politics and run for county auditor in my county of Ashtabula County, and it's a Democratic county. I am a Republican. I defeated a 20-year sitting incumbent. That was in 1994. I took office in 95. And then the Democratic Party came at me every 4 years, and I ran twice for re-election, was re-elected. I do believe in term limits. I think it's amazing how people who run for office tell you they believe in term limits until we elect them, and suddenly no one else is as bright as they are to handle the seat. I think normal people like you and I should get into politics, do our civic duty, and then leave. So I left the auditor's office after my 12th year, and a few months later, I was looking at the Treasurer of State. We're going back to 2005, and it was Jeanette Bradley, who had been Governor Taft's lieutenant governor and then moved to the Treasurer of State. And I just couldn't vote for her because I'm the conservative. I'm everything opposite that she was. I'm low tax, limited government, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and she was totally opposite of that. So I decided to take her on. I can tell you my own Ohio Republican Party, they were not very happy with me because she was the sitting incumbent, but I said conservatives need a choice and they're going to have a choice. So I took her on in '06 and defeated her, which hadn't been done in over 30 years, and became the Republican nominee for Treasurer of State. But '06 was a bad year to be a Republican. So this time around, I'm running for Secretary of State. I always have had an interest in Secretary of State. In fact, back in 2002, if you remember correctly, Ken Blackwell was the Secretary of State, and he publicly announced that he wanted to be governor. That caused, there were about half a dozen of us within the Republican Party who started to move through the Lincoln Day dinners, telling fellow Republicans we were running. I was doing that. And then the Ohio Republican Party got Ken and Bob Taft in a room together, and Ken agreed to stay as the incumbent Secretary of State. So I've always had an interest in the office.
Why did you step out of that race then? Why didn't you run against Blackwell?
That's a good question, but basically Ken represents a lot of who I am. So I run when there's not a conservative candidate. That's a real good question. If you look at this race, we all learned about the 3 branches of government. Secretary of State is a position within the executive branch of government. I hold a master's degree in administration, and I'm the candidate with 12 years experience as an administrator of a public office. I'm extremely qualified for this job, and I really, truly want to be Ohio's next Secretary of State. My opponent in the primary, John Houston, was elected to his state Senate seat, admits that he doesn't live in the district that he represents. He gets sworn in, and 90 days later, he says, I don't want the job. I want to be Secretary of State. I want to be Secretary of State. Right now, I don't hold an elected position. I'm an adjunct professor at Lakeland Community College.
What are you teaching?
I teach speech and interpersonal communication. Great school. I enjoyed that very much.
When you ran for county auditor, is
yes.
that right? Why'd you run? Why county auditor? I mean, besides the conservative, and having someone in the race like that, what did you like about the auditor's office?
Basically, my husband had been party chairman for a while, so I was familiar with politics, and I talked the talk, and I decided to walk the walk. I wasn't pleased with the way he was running the office. He basically wasn't there. The party, when you're an administrator, you need to lead by example. You need to be there. You need to do any of the responsibilities your employees have. That's my type of leadership. The current Secretary of State, let's go to the office I'm running for. Her administration style is top down, my way or the highway. And irregardless of whether you're a Democrat or Republican, if you disagree with her, you might lose your job. My style is totally different. And when I'm Secretary of State, Ohio is so fortunate to have bipartisan boards of election in our 88 counties. By that, for a job duty where a Democrat goes out to do the job responsibility, there is Republican. It's a very, very good system. When I'm Secretary of State, these individuals are going to be treated like the asset that they are and not a liability. They have more education, more experience than any candidate running for Secretary of State. They need to be respected. They need to be listened to. My husband was a board member. I was a poll worker. These poll workers, they're our neighbors and our friends, and they get up at some early hour. They work all day for meager pay because they believe in the democratic representative republic and voting. And they're going to be treated with respect when I'm Secretary of State.
You have some specific ideas or things you want to do if you're elected, when you're elected, however you want to phrase it?
Certainly. Ohio is behind most other states in this office. They need to have someone who really wants to be Secretary of State. Let me give you an example. Ohio's not in compliance with federal law. I've already changed the office. Last summer, I filed a lawsuit against current Secretary of State Bruner. Why? Because I'm facing a candidate who's raised a couple $1 million from lobbyists and special interest groups. So I'm self-funding my race. Well, Ohio statutes, because I'm self-funding, allows my opponent all the statutory caps for donations to come off of him. Federal law already said they struck that down. That's against our First Amendment rights. Ohio still had that on the books. When I filed my lawsuit, it just took a couple months, was granted a federal injunction because we weren't in compliance with federal law. Let's look at the Secretary of State's office. Secretary Bruner, in 2008, she had 200,000 new voter registrations that didn't match state databases. Federal law, Help America Vote Act, requires her to take that at that point and move it to the boards of elections so they can do their jobs to see if this voter is truly eligible to vote. She didn't do that. She didn't move them to the boards. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to follow the law. Ohio is going to come into compliance with federal law.